I think I'll take up just this one other lesson from this past month. On the subject of concentration. Well, you know, this came to me when I was trying to do, Murshid Sam said that one practice you could do when you were driving your car is toward the one, to breathing toward the one. But it's not exactly that same toward the one. There's so many different ways of using this sense of connecting with the one, you know, through breath, through walking. But what you're doing in the sense of when you're, let's say, breathing toward the one as you're driving your car, is this exercise of becoming single-minded, becoming totally one-pointed, drawing everything together. You know, your body awareness, you know, all your senses, your focus, you know, you're right here, you're present, you're right present. Your breath is helping you to bring everything present into a one-pointedness. So this is really the first stage of doing this breath practice toward the one, is to be able to come into oneness, into one-pointedness with what is right there in that moment. And in that moment, you're driving a car. So what's right there is, you know, traffic, you know, signals, you know, other cars, your own inner condition. All of those things need to be brought into focus. Single-mindedness as a nature becomes a great help to concentration. People with a great many responsibilities and people with a great many interests in life find it hard to keep up single-mindedness, which indeed is a great power. This nature can be developed by concentration, but one can develop this nature by a great many things in everyday life which help towards its development. It is a first essential thing for one who practices concentration to allow one thought at a time, or one action at a time, and to keep mind and body busy together. To keep mind and body busy together. When a person does something, he or she should not be thinking of another thing while doing it. When you're driving your car, you know, this, again, and now all of a sudden this becomes very difficult, doesn't it? You know, here you know, I mean, I'm trying to do this practice, right? And you know, and every time my mind is wandering, I'm realizing, you know, this is not it. You know, so it challenges us right at the most basic level. When a person does something, they should not be thinking of another thing while doing it, and if one wants to think out something, one must not be doing something at the same time. Single-mindedness is complete absorption of one's whole being in a single thought, speech, or action. And that if you can be totally absorbed in you know, your speech, action, thought, you know, and that's the same as coming into a very profound state of concentration or meditation. And there's another side to it. Single-mindedness can be developed by dwelling on a subject until the thought be finished, and while thinking on the subject, not allowing the mind to take up another subject. So there's a lot of, first of all, you know, there is this business about letting go and letting the creative imagination work, and, you know, just following that inner creativity. But before one can do that, one needs to know that one has the ability to not do it. You know, just it's our standard illusion about freedom. We think we're free when we just allow everything to happen the way it happens. But sometimes that means we are being slaves of a mind that won't stay still, you know, desires that won't conform to what we would like them to do, and so forth and so on. So until we can master this one-pointedness or know how to come to it, the value of the freedom of the letting it go wherever it wants to go and seeing creatively where it goes is diminished. Ruhaniat Khan says somewhere in the Sangitas, every impulse is sacred and a power in and of itself, and the fulfillment of that impulse leads to liberation, understanding, realization. And in the very next breath he says every impulse is a power in itself, and the one who can withdraw their will from that impulse will become a master of life. So this is that point of it, you know, when that impulse comes up to jump to another subject, to jump to another thought, to be distracted, to be able to not rise to it, to know you have the power not to rise to it. So practicing this kind of toward the one concentration in the midst of activity is a very good thing. As I said, driving a car is very challenging because, you know, you have to, you know, I mean, sure, we can drive it with half of our mind on it. We do it all the time, you know, in a way. But, you know, or some activity like that, you know, running a chainsaw. I mean, you know, something where you'd really want to be fully present, you know, right there, not distracted, not 1 second about thinking of something else, and then there goes some part of your body, you know, that we will miss later. So how do we learn to do this? By practicing it, by practicing, you know, remembering, you know, and noticing every time that we get distracted when we're doing this. And then, you know, having satisfied ourselves that we are capable of doing this, then you can take concentration to the next stage of, you know, seeing freely what arises when you're contemplating on a particular subject. One must not change the topic in the midst of the speech. The same law should be observed there. And the same law should be observed in action. One may busy oneself in action without taking up anything else until the action undertaken be finished. In this way one can develop concentration at every moment of the day and night. And by acquiring this, one acquires mastery over one's own life as well as over life in general. Now, a lot of what we're really working with in the breath falls into two categories. One is simply discovery around what is present in the breath and becoming aware of all the different aspects of breath. And the other is mastery, to have a sense of how we go about purifying the breath, how we go about creating through the breath a connection to what we need to be connected to in that moment, what plane, what aspect of our own self, what divine quality, what that sort of thing. And by being able to, Murshid said, and the masters of concentration are those who produce at their will not only uruj, but kamal and zaval also, and attain self-mastery. So, you know, how do you do this? How do you produce at your will, rising force, falling force, balanced force. How do you bring out, the different elements in the ways that they need to be brought out? Fire and water and earth and air. We're going to work a lot today on the elements, and with this teaching in mind. Both inhalation and exhalation have an effect upon the atmosphere, and it can be harmonious or inharmonious in relation to the atmosphere of another. But when the etheric element is present, it transmutes the nafs, the ego mind, and prevents inharmony. The etheric breath is developed through training and grace. So one of the things we're going to work on throughout the day is the walks of the elements, and then introducing ether into them. And I'm going to give the breath of the elements as Murshid Sam gave these breaths, and then to introduce ether. But again, skipping to another place, which we'll study a little more later, but I just wanted to, this is what Ruhaniat Khan says about this subject of adding ether, or light, as he puts it here. The source of our emotions is our breath, whose impurity brings confusion, and whose purity produces radiance. The source of our emotions is our breath, whose impurity brings confusion, and whose purity produces radiance. As the breath changes from one to the other element, it produces in us an inclination towards a certain emotion. But according to the power of our will, we control or give in to its unruly expression. Every emotion has its color and its savor. One emotion develops into the other, since the proportion of activity of the mind in its increase and decrease produces emotions. No emotion is undesirable so long as it is under the power of the will. But when uncontrolled, even the least effect of it can be a mistake. Fear has the influence of the earth element. Affection has the effect of the water element. That's emotion. Affection, emotion. Fear has the influence of the earth element. Affection has the element of the water element. Anger has the effect of the fire element. And humor has the effect of the air element. So these are conditions that may or may not break out in an unruly fashion. Emotions break out, fears break out, anger breaks out, and even, humor breaks out in times, sometimes when it is inappropriate. Ruhaniat Khan goes on to say, with light, and Murshid would say here, with the sense of drawing in the light that comes out of the stillness, that light that arises right from the silent life. With light, the influence of the earth produces caution. So he says, okay, the fear turns into caution when you breathe light into it, when you touch it with that sense of the light that is arising spontaneously from the void, from the silence itself, from the cosmic egg. The influence of water with light produces benevolence. So emotions can be very confusing. But when you bring the light into it, the ether into it, it transforms into benevolence. The emotion becomes loving, naturally healing. What do you imagine happens with the fire element when you bring light into it? From the anger, it goes. It becomes ardor, he says. You know, a passion for something. You know, I mean, people that have a lot of the fire element are passionate people. Generally, you know, I mean, if their fire can be turned, you know, infused with that sense of light, or with this inner etheric current, then that anger, tendency to anger becomes transformed into ardor, into, you know, I will accomplish this, you know, nothing's going to stand in this way because I want to, you know, so badly. I burn for it, you know. I really burn for doing this. And so that ardor clarifies the tendency of the uncontrolled fire element to generate anger. The unpurified fire element, as it comes up in our breath. You know, we're not, I mean, these changes in the breath are happening all the time throughout the day. The influence of the air with light produces joy. So that, so instead of just kind of like this sort of humor, which, you know, breaks out, can be undercutting, can, you know, I mean, it moves into another aspect of, which is joy. And ether with light produces peace. So just bringing that sense of light into pure spaciousness, into the container of pure spaciousness, which is the etheric container of all the elements. It's that space out of which they all come. But to understand that that space spontaneously is generating pure light. So that it is, if you bring that light into that sense of spaciousness, all of a sudden you have what some people have said, Rinpoche's and others, is the definition of Buddha. The marriage of absolute light and absolute space. Emptiness and space. Emptiness and illumination as one. Not a light that begins and ends, but a light that is a fabric of the whole, of what is right in the emptiness of the container of all that is. So this is the direction that we're going with in terms of the purification of the breath, using the elements. I think maybe I'll read a little bit more from this wonderful text. Yeah, I'm going to read just this other section right now. The source of our bodily desires is one, the breath. When the breath leaves the body, all desire leaves it also. And as the breath changes its elements, and the elements, earth, water, fire, and ether, predominate in the breath by turns, this being caused by the different grades of activity in the breath, so the desires change. Therefore, in a certain climate, one feels hungry, and in certain weather, one feels thirsty, because the influence of weather on the breath kindles in the breath more of a certain element. There is always a possibility of confusing desire with avidity, which is not a bodily desire, but the desire of the mind that has experienced its joy through the bodily desire. even in the absence of the bodily desire, the mind demands and forces the body to desire. This is what he's calling, you know, so this is why he wants to say, okay, every desire, if you could get to it in its pure form and just feel it as it is, as this impulse that is rising, it's sacred. And you can give it permission to rise, and you can go with it with full confidence, knowing that its unfoldment is a sacred process. But don't get confused by the fact that you've had this experience with this bodily desire before, and now your mind has gotten some joy out of it. And now your mind is saying, well, I want this experience again, and I want to, you know, now require the body to do this or this sort of thing to do this. And that is what he's calling avidity, or which is not a bodily desire, but the desire of the mind that has experienced its joy through the bodily desire. And even in the absence of the bodily desire, the mind demands and forces the body to desire. In this aspect, every bodily desire is out of place and undesirable and enslaves one. That's what I was getting at before, you know. I mean, that notion of just not having any place where you know that you have the ability not to rise to the desire leads to a kind of slavery.